All right, everybody. I hope everyone had a phenomenal Thanksgiving long weekend. Hope your bellies are full and everyone is in good health. Now everyone has to ask themselves, what the hell is going on with Canada? Oh my goodness, everybody, all politicians, all the press, the whole world, I guess anyone that has anything to do with Canada and India, their heads are spinning because Canada expelled Indian diplomats. But also India expelled Canadian diplomats, and they're saying Canada didn't expel ours, we took them back. And Canada's saying we took ours back over the killing of a Indian terrorist long ago that was staying here in Canada. Who is he? What the hell is going on? What does this mean? And is this all smoke and mirrors? A lot to cover today. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage y'all to smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. I will break everything down for you right now this morning. The most important thing to know is that Justin Trudeau is facing, never mind what's going on with India, he's facing a lot of controversy right here in this country because over the weekend, you had 20 or 30 different Liberal MPs that were writing letters. They didn't want to put their names on it. They haven't come forward with the press, right? It's all anonymous, saying, hey, we don't want Justin Trudeau to run this cabinet anymore. He should not be our leader. He needs to resign. Now, Justin Trudeau did respond during the emergency briefing that he gave about India relations, and he said, look, we're not going to talk about that right now because we need to focus on what's best for our country. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, remove those factors. What else is going on here in Canada? Justin Trudeau faces immense backlash, all-time low for polling, and he also has given the NDP everything that they want. The Bloc are saying time is ticking. It's almost time for an election, right? So Justin Trudeau's time is just, there's a clock on it, right? It's coming to an end, whether that's 12 months from now with the next scheduled federal election, whether that's 12 weeks from now, whether that's 12 days from now, we don't really know. But Justin Trudeau is in shit. Like, he's in deep shit, like up to his neck, right? So he needs to regain confidence in Canadians. So this whole thing about India relations, he's saying that, look, we need to protect Canadians, and Canadians feel like they are a threat by the Indian government, and anyone could die by the Indian government. And so we need to do what's best, and we need to expel these Indian diplomats. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's true. Like, I get the fact that, you know, the government of India wanted to allegedly kill, which apparently they did, this, you know, someone who was listed as a terrorist in India, but living here in Canada. I get they wanted to do that, and it turns out that they did that successfully, right? Is that legal? Should they be able to do that? No, I don't think that they should, because this is Canada. That means that they've breached our security. But for Justin Trudeau to say to everybody, hey, look, we need to protect you guys. We're doing this for you, to protect you. Dude, not once did I ever feel like India was a threat to Canada. Like, not once did I ever feel like, oh my God, the Indian government, they're going to take over Canada and our Canadian government, and we might all get assassinated. But like, that's just not something that has crossed my mind. So that and that alone, it raises an argument for, is this smoke and mirrors? And I definitely don't want this to be a conspiratorial spin, but keep in mind that Justin Trudeau is under immense scrutiny. He's under a lot of pressure to do something because the NDP have lost confidence in him. The Bloc has lost confidence in him. Pierre Poilievre has already got himself a new card and a name tag that says, you know, Prime Minister of Canada. Like, everybody's ready for the next step, but Trudeau is holding on to every ounce of power that he possibly can. So I'm not saying that it's smoke and mirrors, but, you know, if a shoe fits, then a shoe fits. But nonetheless, this also is like a kind of a big deal. The fact that India pulled this off, that's not at all what should have happened. Canada should have said, oh, that's a terrorist. You guys want him? Okay, sure. here you go. Maybe not that simple, but there should have been a little bit more communication from the governments instead of this massive shit show that could lead to massive economic repercussions. But let's start taking a look at some of the pieces here of the puzzle. So who is Hardeep Singh Nijjar? On June 18th, 2023, Nijjar was shot and killed in his pickup truck by two masked gunmen in the parking lot of the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurudwara in Surrey, right? That's obviously like no regular Canadian Joe is trying to kill this guy. So like it was some political affiliation. Now, who is he according to India? Well, he had been labeled a terrorist by India, accused of, among other activities, being the mastermind behind the Khalistan Tiger Force, a banned militant group in the country. He was 45 years old when he was shot and killed by two gunmen. All right, so should have Canada try to get along a little bit more with India in order to solve this person that they obviously wanted to kill. Like, it's hard to believe that the government of India had infiltrated Canada to the point where they were able to pull off this type of assassination. It seems surreal, but it is a fact, right? And so by that measure, were the police not aware of it? Was our intelligence groups not aware of that? If they weren't, that's extremely concerning. If they were aware of it and didn't intervene and try to like negotiate politically, then that's also concerning. So no matter how you look at it, this is a really, really messed up situation. And as a result of it, you have India that said, okay, we are taking our diplomats out of Canada. Or actually, India has said, get your diplomats out of India as well. So India has expelled these Canadian diplomats. You got Mr. Stewart, Mr. Hebert, Miss Marie, right? Ian Ross, Adam James, like all of these people. These are all people that have until the midnight, 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, October 19th, to get out of New Delhi. And if they don't, likely they will be arrested and tensions will get extremely high. And there'll be prisoners there and all that stuff. And then Canada's going to have to negotiate. It's just not going to be good. So here's what Melanie Joly on the official Canadian government website has said. Minister Joly announced expulsion of Indian diplomats related to ongoing investigation on violent criminal activity linked to the government of India. So India expels diplomats, and then Canada expels diplomats as well under the guise of serious criminal activity. And we don't really know who did what first. Like, it's all just kind of murky at this point. But let's just assume Canada said, oh, okay, yeah, we now know by the RCMP that India pulled this off, so we're kicking your diplomats out. India's retaliatory response was the same, but it's also not good. Like, India is also threatening to cut off, economic ties, trade deals, and so on and so forth. So it's just like such a fast and radical response that if you're wondering the same question I am, where did this come from? That is a phenomenal question to ask, right? This has kind of been in the works a little bit behind the scenes, but nonetheless, the timing of it just makes anyone with critical thinking just have to ask themselves, well, that's oddly convenient for Justin Trudeau, who's at an all-time low, to then go out and say, hey, look, Canada, I'm keeping you safe. We're kicking out the spies. I don't know. The timing of it is quite ironic. So then you have the RCMP that this is all happening because the RCMP is accusing Indian diplomats of criminal activities, including homicide, which is a wild accusation. So just to recap for those that did not see it, and I very much apologize if you've already seen this, but this is what the RCMP had said yesterday.
An extraordinary situation is compelling us to speak about what we have discovered in our multiple ongoing investigations into the involvement of agents of the Government of India in serious criminal activity in Canada. It's not our normal process to publicly disclose information about ongoing investigation in an effort to preserve their integrity. However, we feel it is necessary to do so at this time due to the significant threat to public safety in our country. Over the past few years, and more recently, law enforcement agencies in Canada, including the RCMP, have successfully investigated and charged a significant number of individuals for their direct involvement in homicides, extortions, and other criminal acts of violence. In addition, there has been well over a dozen credible and imminent threats to life which have led to the conduct of duty to warn by law enforcement with members of the South Asian community and specifically members of the pro-Khalistan movement. Links tying native efforts, the RCMP has obtained evidence that demonstrates 4 very serious issues. 1, violent extremists impacting both countries. 2, links tying agents of the government of India to homicides and violent acts. 3, the use of organized crime to create perception of unsafe environment targeting the South Asian community in Canada. And the 4th, interference in democratic processes.
So no matter how you look at it, you also have to realize that this is extremely unusual for a response by Canada. Never, and I quite literally mean, to my understanding, never has the RCMP been so transparent right out the gate for something that they've just made a decision on, like immediately. This is unprecedented. Like, this is almost historic. But again, why? The timing of it just seems absolutely crazy. Now we're going to take a look at some of the footage of Justin Trudeau giving his speech, right? Here, let's just look at the body language.
And the protection of our citizens is paramount. That's why when our law enforcement and intelligence officials began pursuing credible allegations that agents of the government of India were directly involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on Canadian soil, we responded. As the RCMP Commissioner stated earlier, they have clear and compelling evidence that agents of the Government of India have engaged in and continue to engage in activities that pose a significant threat to public safety.
This whole thing has been extremely public right from the get-go. Right out the gate, when Justin Trudeau realized that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was murdered, they almost ignored the fact that he was a terrorist or labeled as a terrorist in India, and came out right out the gate accusing India of allegedly pulling off this murder, like almost without any substantial evidence, right? It was wild. It broke the internet. India was not happy. And in the moment that had happened, it had been like just after the moment Trudeau came out with all those accusations was like within a week or two after visiting Modi in India. So it's just the timing of everything is so almost advantageous for Justin Trudeau, but again, it does not make Canada look good, right? For like, okay, you're taking immediate action, you're being transparent, you also let this happen.
That the government of India made a fundamental error in thinking that they could engage in supporting criminal activity against Canadians here on Canadian soil, whether it be murders or extortion or other violent acts. It is absolutely unacceptable for any country, any democracy that upholds the rule of law. That is why we have taken such significant measures, why the RCMP chose to come out today and disrupt the pattern of Indian diplomats collecting through questionable and illegal means information on Canadian citizens that were then fed to criminal organizations that would then take violent actions from extortion to murder against Canadians. No country, particularly not a democracy that upholds the rule of law, can accept this fundamental violation of its sovereignty.
Oh, and I agree on that aspect. It absolutely is a violation of Canada. It's a violation of what we stand for. But again, Justin Trudeau, like, where were you? Where was your security team? Why did this ever happen? And why were we harboring somebody who, like, Canada, diplomatically speaking, respects India? Right, we view them as a democracy, one of the largest democracies in the world, and it's just kind of crazy that they are allies, or supposed to be allies, had somebody listed as a terrorist who said, hey, we know that he's living in Canada. Canada, Justin Trudeau personally recognized that he was living here, and then that individual got murdered, right? So, like, why not try to figure out those things? It's almost like if you're a terrorist living in Canada, or you're a Canadian terrorist, and then you go live in India. I don't think India is just going to be like, oh yeah, sure, you can hide out here. We have no problems with that. And then also starting like a bunch of protests in India about Canadian affairs. Like it just seems all so crazy. But let's take a bit of a deeper dive here into what's really going on. And for that, I've got a CBC video pulled up. So let's take a look at this together.
David Morrison, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Nathalie Drouin, the National Security Advisor, traveled to Singapore to meet with Ajit Doval, India's National Security Advisor. They were joined by a senior official from the RCMP who walked them through the evidence the National Police Force had collected. That included intercepted Indian communications and other information that the RCMP has found since the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canada believes Indian diplomats were collecting evidence on Sikh activists and sending those details back to the government. And those activists were later threatened or attacked, or in the case of Nijjar, murdered. A Canadian official says Doval did admit that Indian diplomats collected information, but denied it led to violence and denied any role in violent acts in Canada. India also refused to waive diplomatic immunity and allow police to interview the diplomats. So just before 9 a.m. today, Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly delivered the order expelling India's High Commissioner and 5 other diplomats from the country. India responded by expelling 6 Canadian diplomats, including Acting High Commissioner Stuart Wheeler.
The Government of Canada has done what India has long been asking for. Canada has provided credible, irrefutable evidence of ties between agents of the Government of India and a murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Now it is time for India to live up to what it said it would do and look into those allegations. It is in the interest of both our countries and the peoples of our countries to get to the bottom of this. Canada stands ready to cooperate with India.
Dominic LeBlanc is the Minister of Public Safety, and he joins me in the studio now. Minister.
See, they say that they're ready to cooperate, but you're seeing such impulsive decisions made right out the gate, and it's all so public. That's the part that I'm having a hard time understanding. And I hate that the government is like, hey, look, we're trying to be transparent. Shut the hell up. Where the hell have you been with your transparency on quite literally everything else? It's almost like he's doing this as these Hail Mary antics, right? On Thanksgiving, when he's at an all-time low, just came back from overseas. Like, the timing of everything, not to sound conspiratorial, but it's just so bizarre.
Thanks for coming in on a pretty extraordinary day. I want to start with the RCMP statement because they sort of gave us the scope and breadth of what we're dealing with here, where they called this an extraordinary situation, compelling them to go public, because we don't see news conferences like this very often. But they felt the need to do it due to the significant threat to public safety in our country. How would you describe this threat to public safety in our country right now?
I think you're right, David, to say that it was an extraordinary step. The RCMP kept me informed at a high level of some of this investigative work, but they concluded in their own judgment that it was important to disrupt and dismantle what was increasingly a violent, organized criminal effort, including the participation of 6 individuals who work for the Indian government, diplomats who are in Canada. It is unusual, as you say, that the RCMP stand up and talk about evidence they've collected over many, many months in a number of different investigations, I would assume. Normally, we learn about these things when criminal charges are laid and a suspect is arrested and then there's a court process. But they thought that it was important to disrupt and dismantle this increasingly aggressive and concerning criminal activity in many parts of the country. It wasn't just one or two cities. I heard about it from mayors in different communities in Western Canada and Ontario, heard increasingly about it in Quebec. So the RCMP thought this was an important step to disrupt and dismantle this activity. The Minister of Foreign Affairs expelled these 6 diplomats. But David, they're also continuing actively a number of criminal investigations with police partners in almost a dozen Canadian cities looking into specific criminal activities. My hope is that those investigations lead also to criminal charges and ultimately convictions.
A dozen Canadian cities. There are a lot of numbers flying around today, and I appreciate there is a lack of specificity required to protect the integrity of investigations. But when Commissioner Duhem and his deputy are talking about 8 people have been arrested for murder, 22 have been arrested for extortion, and you say a dozen Canadian cities. Are these all activities and incidents that tie directly back to the government of India and the diplomats they had in Canada?
Yeah, so I'm not involved in the intricacies of ongoing active police operations. The RCMP shared with me a list of municipal police forces that they have partnered with as part of these different investigations. And I was surprised the extent to which so many Canadian communities were working with the RCMP in these investigations. So I think that Commissioner shared what information he can share. I have a lot of faith in the work that Commissioner Duhem does, the Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn, who, as you noted, was with other officials in Singapore. These are very experienced, very senior police officers who have taken a lot of time with the help of dozens and dozens of colleagues in the RCMP, and as I said, partners in other police forces and federal intelligence agencies. So I've had a privileged chance to see this remarkable work being done. And I think Canadians, and particularly Sikh Canadians, who understandably and have been sharing with us and publicly their concerns for the safety of their community, they need to know the RCMP are very, very engaged with other police partners, and they should have a lot of confidence that they'll continue to do the work necessary to bring before justice people perpetrating these crimes.
You say disrupt and dismantle. We've seen these arrests, but the big event today was the expulsion of the 6 Indian diplomats, including the High Commissioner to Canada. Is that dismantling a criminal organization, in your view, kicking out 6 Indian government officials?
Well, again, I don't want to speak for the commissioner. His news conference, he shared the details that he and the prosecutors and lawyers that would advise him in terms of what's appropriate to share publicly. He shared what...
So, I mean, again, like, talk about lack of transparency in what's supposed to be a transparent movement. If you're calling the Indian government and saying that, hey, you guys killed one of our guys, apparently, and we're going to kick out your diplomats. By doing that, you would be going after a terrorist entity, right? Or why not just answer that question properly? My goodness, man, these people need like a good shoulder shake because they just freaking talk in circles, and it's so damn annoying.
What he was able to share. But if
it's more of a yes or no
6
question.
Indian diplomats were expelled as a result of the RCMP evidence collected in this investigation, I think that speaks for itself. But it isn't the end of the story, David. This is what, in the RCMP's independent judgment, was an important step to disrupt and dismantle, to make it harder for this criminal organization to continue to perpetrate these increasingly violent acts. But they'll continue to do the normal police work that they do with partners across the country and bring before the criminal justice system those that decide to perpetrate criminal acts in Canada. And I spoke today, for example, with the U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland, the Homeland Security Secretary in the United States, Alejandro Mayorkas, precisely to share with them the information that the RCMP were bringing out publicly today. But to urge them to continue to work with us and to share information the FBI might have, other American intelligence agencies. There has been a very, very extensive collaboration to date. They said that to me. They have thanked us in some cases for information that we've shared with them. But it's very important, I think, particularly Five Eyes countries, the UK, the US, for example,
Right.
that this work be seamless. So I'm very encouraged that that'll be the case.
I was struck by the language you're using in this interview, but in particular the language the Prime Minister used earlier. When we talk about stories like this, in my job, we have to use alleged, claim, allegations. They
didn't do that.
The government of Canada. You're absolutely convinced, it sounds to me, from what the Prime Minister was saying, that the Indian government is clearly involved with this. Otherwise, you're not kicking out these 6 diplomats.
Well, I was convinced by the evidence that the RCMP collected as part of an ongoing and extensive criminal investigation over many months. The RCMP commissioner is Canada's most senior police officer. He leads an organization of 20,000 plus police officers and 10,000 civilians. He's not going to stand at a news conference on Thanksgiving Monday at 11:30 and talk publicly about evidence if he's not absolutely
If it's alleged.
convinced that this evidence is reliable and credible. And when the government is given that evidence, the Foreign Affairs Minister took, I think, the only decision that she could, and she expelled these diplomats.
The other thing that Commissioner Duan...
So by that standard, I suppose, I hate to admit it, but I suppose that this was a good decision if it's undeniable evidence, or else they wouldn't have kicked out the diplomats. Then good job on actually doing something that's in the best interest of Canadian democracy and Canadian security. But at the same time, like this could have been avoided, right? You knew that there was a Indian labeled terrorist living here. It could have absolutely been avoided. And actually, I want to pass a question off to you guys. Do you agree with me, or am I freaking losing my mind here? Right? Like, could this have been avoided? Like, why aren't we aware of, okay, ABC, like, John Smith shows up to the border and says, hey, I want to move into Canada. Okay, great. Come on in. Let me just check your records. Checks the records, listed as a terrorist in, Mongolia, or in this case, India. Oh, yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. You might not be the person that we want to let in here, right? Like, what the hell's going on with our borders? I always thought that we had like a crazy good background check system in Canada. I always thought that we had pretty freaking good security. And as we're realizing, that's not the case. And that is kind of nerve-wracking. I'll be very honest. That makes me very uneasy.
Says today, and this is from the written statement, that they have found links tying agents of the government of India to homicides, plural. There's an S there. We know of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Oh my God, there's more.
Number, and I appreciate you can't do that, but that's not a typo, right? We're talking about more than one killing.
Again, I don't type out the
It's more of a yes or no.
statements myself.
Or you would know, would you not, if it's more than one, based on us getting to this point?
I know what I read in the statement, and as I said, I know that these statements are vetted in great detail, precisely not to prejudice ongoing criminal investigations. The last thing that they would want to do is say something publicly that later becomes an excuse for a defense attorney or for a judge to decide that for whatever reason the trial is going to be stayed, the charges.
All right, yeah. No, that guy needs a good freaking shoulder shake, man. Come on, are you kidding me? Like, answer the question. Like, what the hell's wrong with these people? Why is it so difficult to answer a question? You didn't write the report. You're not liable for what's in the report. Just say, I read the report. Yeah, it was plural. We're going to know more about that later on. That's simple. Why is it so difficult to just say that? Oh my goodness, man. Politics would be like, you'd have so many more people invested in our news, invested in the democracy of our country, invested in just things going on here in Canada. If you actually answered simple questions with relatively simple answers. It's just so freaking frustrating. And when there is a change of government, whether that's in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a year from now. I hope that it's not this difficult for Pierre to answer these questions. I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind, Pierre. If you have a hard time answering questions like this, come on, dude. You ask so many yes or no questions. You got to be able to answer in yes or no format. That's where we're going to end this video, ladies and gentlemen. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about just your opinions and your thoughts on what the hell is going on. Is this good for India? Is it good for Canada? Are you agreeing with certain parts of Trudeau? Let me know any of those points. On your way out, if you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to smash the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.